Hello everyone, I'm Matt Little and we're going to go over moving from shooting position to shooting position, what competitive shooters refer to as position entries and position exits. Now let's put this in a bit of a context and talk about this, right? If I'm leaving one position of cover to move to another position of cover and I'm exposing myself to my opponent's fire by doing so, I have an important reason I need to be there rather than there. So I need to move from one position to the other with a sense of purpose, right? All too often in tactical training circles, what we see is kind of this very deliberate, kind of affected style of running from position to position. For some reason, I don't know what it is, whenever we put a gun in people's hands, it seems like they think the rules of athletic performance go out the window, when in fact they don't. And remember what we said a second ago, if I'm leaving a position of safety and exposing myself to risk before I get to another position of safety, I must have an important reason for wanting to get there. So I need to get there with a sense of purpose. So yes, the shooting part of this is absolutely essential, but I need to prioritize the movement piece as well. Make sure I'm moving athletically, rapidly, and most importantly, coming into position smoothly so that I'm able to shoot. There's a couple of other tactical considerations in how they do and don't affect this drill that I'll cover in just a second when I do the walkthrough. But I'm going to switch gears for a minute here. Say you're a competitive shooter. Any time that I am not spending collecting points through the shots I fire is time that I am losing that stage and potentially losing that match. So once again, if I'm just a competitive shooter, I still need to get from there to there as rapidly and efficiently as possible while still being able to shoot because I come in stable enough to get an effective sight picture. I want to think of shooting sooner rather than faster, if that makes sense. So let's look at this from the standpoint of a competitive shooter then. If I'm in a shooting competition, an action shooting sports match, whether it's IDPA or USPSA, any time that I'm spending not collecting points is time that I'm losing. I want to maximize the amount of time I spend actually shooting in each stage so that I can shoot more efficiently and potentially win the match. So I also have to move from there to there with a sense of purpose. So the setup for this drill is relatively simple. I have two barricades. You can use either Bianchi barricades like these, or I like using the plastic barrels stacked on top of each other. These are set about 10 yards apart, roughly. In front of them, about 10 yards, are two BC zone steel targets. The idea is I'm going to shoot that target on the left from around the left side of that barricade. I'm going to run over here, come into position properly, and shoot that target to the right from around the right side of that barricade. Now when I do this, as I said a minute ago, I want to be as athletically efficient, as biomechanically correct as possible. I want to use the form that optimizes my ability to produce speed and still come in balanced and smooth enough to make the shot. So let's talk through this. From here, I'm going to engage this steel target with 2 rounds from around the left side of the barricade. The moment that second shot breaks, my finger is going to come off the trigger and I'm going to release the gun with this hand. My general rule of thumb on this is anything more than 5 steps, I'm taking the support hand off the gun. That applies to carbine as well for this kind of movement. I want to get as much acceleration as possible. And as any athlete who's ever sprinted can tell you, you get up to 40% of your acceleration from your upper body. So I don't want to be wedded to the gun. I don't want to be stiff and tight and tense. I want to let this hand come off. I want to be able to pump the arms like I would for any other sprinting, with the added issue of being conscious of where my muzzle is pointed, right? So 2 shots, the moment the second shot breaks, finger comes off the trigger, hand comes off the gun. At the same time, I'm going to glance at exactly where I want my feet to go. This is a lot like looking at the magwell on a reload just for a moment, for a fraction of a second. Visual input drives athletic performance. And if I train this in my practice, I can teach my subconscious to put my feet exactly where I glanced through repetition and practice. It will learn to do that for me. So that quick glance tells me where I want to be. At the same time I do that glance, I'm going to drive off of this leg and take a deep lunging step in the direction of travel. I'm going to accelerate through, pumping my arms like I said. Now if you notice, I'm keeping this gun in a safe direction and I'm not crossing my hands. Right? So my shooting hand is staying in a safe direction, it's going over the top of the other arm. I'm going to accelerate on this surface and for this distance probably to right about here. Now this is going to vary based on the surface you're running on and how far you're running. So once again, this is something you have to figure out in your training through repetition. You have to teach your subconscious how much it can accelerate and how far before you run out of traction, right? I'm gonna take a couple little short, choppy steps to bleed off the momentum. Same time, this hand is coming back up on the gun. Now my last 3 steps are gonna look like this. I take a large step to get rid of the last bit of momentum. I'm mounting the gun. Take a large step, and then the last step is this foot sliding up into position. I should be smooth and stable enough to break the shot. So once again, mounting the gun, large step, slide into position, stable enough to make the shot. When I do this, I want to mount the gun early enough that the moment I see the target, I am able to shoot. Now, obviously, in a real world situation, you may not have made the decision to shoot, so that would change that, right? It's also true that in a real world situation, I may want to set up here and then pie off. The thing about doing this in training is that if that is all I do, I can never do the faster, more aggressive version. But if I train the faster, more aggressive version, it's easy to turn the volume down and do it the more methodical way. So I want to always make sure that I train at, for lack of a better analogy, a higher volume level than I may need to do in real life, because it's easy to turn the volume down. It's not so easy to turn the volume up. You make mistakes if you've never trained in that more aggressive fashion. Last 3 steps. Gun is up and mounted. Large step, stay low, step, slide into position. I should be stable enough to make the shot. It's also important on this that I don't raise my hips at any part of this process. Once I drop my hips over there to run, they stay the same height until I'm done. Otherwise, I waste time and I make the shooting more difficult and the sight's more unstable. All right, I'm gonna load up the gun and we'll do it live. Position, entry, and exit. Now this is a very basic version of this. There are variations and more advanced versions, but this is a good solid foundation to work on to develop that ability to move aggressively and still shoot accurately.